Welcome to the StartupJab.
Welcome, loyal Jabberwocks and new listeners, to another glorious episode of StartupJab. I'm your host, T. Hopkins, and with me, as always, my most excellent co-host, the Han to my Chewie, Jason Ellis.
See, I'll be honest with you. I would have been Chewy. I'm kind of hairy, and I could have pulled it. I can do it pretty well.
Oh, see, okay, all right. I will relinquish it. You can do that much better than I can. I had to get an audio file for that one, so you get to be Chewy. From
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, everybody, it's good to see you for another week. I know with December coming to a close, everybody's busy and trying to get their work done. And as always, we do appreciate it when you spend your afternoons or your mornings, or really whenever you listen to us, spend your time with us. We certainly do appreciate it. Teague, I think we got a hell of a show today. What do you think?
We do. We're joined by Andrew Conklin. Andrew, thanks for being with us. For those of you who do not know Andrew already, and there are a lot of you who already do know him, but for those of you who don't, Andrew is a tech entrepreneur and founder of Routeam, which provides software to the fitness industry. He also does, among other things, engineering for Craver, a California-based concierge-on-demand service, community building for the ACM, that's the Association of Computing Machinery, and last but certainly not least, Andrew is the founder of DC Nightowls, now known as DC2 Digital Nomads, which is part of the data community DC, for which he also sits on the board. So, Andrew, do you even sleep?
A little bit. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for making time out of your extraordinarily busy schedule to join us.
I'll be sure to bring the comic unrelief to you two. Jokes.
I see what you did there. Oh gosh. Anyway, no, it's always good to have you, Andrew. And Teague and I are we go back, and Andrew certainly has been instrumental in my reentry into the Washington startup and technology scene. And for those of you who are looking for a compass, somebody to guide you north towards success, Andrew is certainly one of those compasses. Compass A. That's not it either. Yeah. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about what your passions are. What are the things that clearly you're not lacking for things to do. What makes you tick? What are the things that make you want to get up in the morning and do all these different kinds of projects?
It starts with, I come from the Midwest, and I started to get into this world of being healthy. I've got a lot of other health reasons that I could go into, later in the conversation. But I've developed this passion for helping my family and people across the country become healthier. So basically, that's been my primary focus. And then in my field, computer science, I really appreciated getting to know a lot of people in computer science, and community events helped me do that.
I think that's, in many ways, those of us that know you would certainly say that the community work that you do is at the crux of a lot of your efforts. I mean, before Brilliant was a thing, I was trying to figure my way through, sort of getting launched with a business, and DC Nightowls and now Digital Nomads certainly provided a good foundation for that. That came from you trying to, get some time outside of your day job to build other projects, right? That came from your work in the government, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate all the compliments people give me about community building, but I do it for very selfish reasons. I get a lot out of it. There's just a wide network of people that want to see me go somewhere, and they're super helpful in my path. The Night Owls. Yeah, it started because I was a federal contractor back in the day, and I was with a coworker, Joy Chen, who helped me start the group, and we wanted to work on a side project and explore the fitness sector. Mm-hmm. And so we got into that, and we did that through Night Owls. Who's that? Is that jabbing or something?
So Andrew being unfamiliar.
The little
applause. Yeah. For those of you listening on the podcast version, Andrew is discovering that on Blab you can give everybody some applause by clicking on their window. I think it's called giving props, if memory serves correctly. Yeah. Yeah. For those listening via podcast, they're going, what is he looking at? I can't tell. I can't see. Anyway. Very cool. So yeah, I mean, you clearly got your hands in a lot of different pots.
Yes.
Do you, what are the challenges that you see in what you do with the fitness industry, with the technology industry, and that intersection?
With the fitness industry, fitness tech industry, like there's a very big player on the market that just IPO'd this past year called MindBody Online, and they've established in their S1 that their market penetration is 1%. So, like they're saying this market is very large.
Yeah.
There is, like new competitors down the street from us that I'm not going to speak about. There, as well as in other parts of the country. But, it's a large market. There's a lot of work to be done and a lot of people to help out. And we go wide and we go focused. We do both back and forth. I think that's what you do in a product-based company. It's a lot of oscillation between like, I think I know what I'm doing, and let me explore a little bit more.
Yeah. So it's fascinating that it's a public company with 1% of the market. I think, it just goes to show the adage about just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean there's not space for you to come along and do it also, or perhaps better. And
yeah.
Very cool.
Well, listen, we appreciate you joining us. I know that you've got a wide background of knowledge and information that you have freely shared with a ton of people. Throughout the course of the conversation, we'll certainly be leaning on that. I'd love to, if you guys are up for it, let's jump into some articles. Let's talk about some concepts. Let's solve some problems today. What do you guys say?
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Sounds good.
So we're going to start with see, this one is yours. The question of the tail end. Do you want to describe that?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a little bit outside of our normal subject matter, but it's just a great post from Wait But Why recently about how when you actually stop and look at how much time you have on this planet, and how much of it has already gone by, and then you look at things that are less evenly distributed, like say, one of the examples they give is the number of days you will spend with your parents, for instance, where most of that is front loaded, and so if you've already graduated high school and left home, 80% of that is already gone, and it's sort of a way of looking at the number of things the number of times we might do given things in our lives, and sort of a way to look at it in a perspective to be grateful for the times that we've had and the times that we will have, and recognize that we don't have unlimited time and we should make the best of it.
Yeah, the visualization part of this is really interesting. I'm particularly entertained with the number of dumplings that that the author has eaten, because that's a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong. The number of people, the number of days that you spent with your parents is pretty depressing if you think about it that way. But it's an interesting way to visualize your impact every day. That actually, depending on the scale, it either really matters or it really doesn't. But it does tick off every time. It's an interesting construct.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of folks are thinking about the number of books that we read. If you average 5 books a year, which seems relatively reasonable, then you may only get to read another, say, 300 books in the rest of your life, and never know what happens in any of the other ones. And so worth picking and choosing about which ones you want to prioritize. And that was sort of a recurring theme in a lot of it is that priorities matter, right? Like we don't have unlimited time. And so thinking about where we spend our time matters, and quality time matters, and recognizing like we're not going to have unlimited time with the people that we have time with. And so being fully present when we're with them is really valuable. And a lot of it made me feel very fortunate to live in the same city as my parents and my brother, and actually, get to see them more often than I would if I were living across the country.
Yeah.
So it was, and this time of year particularly, I was feeling very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the holidays coming upon us, it's definitely a challenge. Andrew, your thoughts?
Yeah. When I see that chart, it makes me think about like entrepreneurship, where, when I think about entrepreneurship, it boils it down to like just like 1 to 3 life events. You get like just really big moments. You only need like 1 or 2 of them in your life, and like it's huge.
Yeah.
And so I look at that, I'm like, just in terms of like, I think somebody said something about like I'm not a failing entrepreneur. I just facing challenges. I know I'm an entrepreneur. You just keep plugging.
Yeah.
Steve Blank, when I saw him talk once at 1776, he mentioned how he gets tired after 4 years. Like if a company isn't going off in a good direction, he like kind of disconnects after 4 years. But he said that's not like an ideal formula. It's not like a formula. It's just him. He said that one guy that started a company that he was affiliated with, and then he got out of, the guy made it like 17 or 18 years, and it like practically almost failed. And then he had this huge payout because he got all the shares back before it became successful. So, when I think about those, that's why I like starting things and starting new projects, from the start, because I feel like it's like the best opportunity to get in one of those spots where it's like, okay, there might be all of these, many dots and circles, but in there, 2 or 3 of them is like huge. It's like big life moments.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say the 5 books a year thing, that putting that visualization to it makes me I need to read more. Like that by itself.
Right. Doesn't it just make you feel like, well, okay, the solution here is to hack the system. I'm just going to read 20 books a year.
Yeah, I want my visualization to be bigger. It's such a vanity metric, but I want it so badly. Although the dumplings thing, I'd take that. I'm okay with that. It looks like, those look like icons out of Where's Waldo? Anyway, not the point. No, I think it's interesting. One of the great things about the data visualization movement is that it can give you some perspective you don't otherwise see. And I think something like that is really, really cool. So I'm a fan.
Yeah. The other visualization it makes me think of is the visualization of the calendar of the universe from Cosmos. I don't know if it's where the universe is a 12-month calendar, and all of human existence is in the last, I forget what, like some number of seconds of the last day of the last month.
Yeah.
Well,
speaking right. Well, it brings up an interesting question of relativity. My stepdad, who's a math teacher, is fond of the comparison to, in terms of, if you think in terms of scale, right? When you're a baby, the day that you're born, that first 24 hours, that is your whole concept of existence, right? 24 hours is your whole life.
Right. Yeah.
So an hour is a long time for you versus when you've been alive a month, right? Then you have 31 days times 24 hours. And suddenly an hour is in perspective different versus the year versus 10 years versus 20 versus 30, which is why now that we're all past college age, and anybody who is past college age probably experiences this, time suddenly goes faster. It doesn't, but it does, right? Our experience of it is suddenly faster because the concept of a year or 5 years is not nearly as bad as it used to be. 45 minutes stuck in a class you hate isn't nearly as painful as it once was. Although
it's the idea of, I think the concept is called time dilation. And it's our perspective of it is shifting such that by the time we're the age that we are, the majority of our lives has already happened from an experience standpoint, right? We have experienced the majority of our lives because when you are younger, it feels like a longer time than when you are older. And so that's why most people are kind of pretty set in their ways by the time.
I'm sure it's a construct that Star Trek has abused many times. Andrew, what were you going to say?
I think you just called out a rule of dating too. Never schedule ahead longer than you've been dating somebody.
Right. I like that. Actually, that's I got to write that down.
Reasonable. That seems reasonable.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Well, moving on to different. We've started with time. Now we're going to move on to people. There's a great 538 article, and actually I saw this when it got posted. It's a fascinating conversation from August about the fact that these days in the job hunt, you kind of are required to be a people person, right? Hard skills aren't enough these days to land a lucrative job. And that one of the challenges is that while we're still putting a tremendous amount of effort in, training in STEM fields like mathematics and computer science, that there's still a need for people to be able to associate and really, talk to other people. And that sometimes that is valued as much, if not more so, than the skills themselves. Have you guys seen that? I mean, have you seen in your own experiences evidence of that?
Well, I mean, I think the piece of this that I think is interesting is on some level, the headline of the best jobs now require you to be a people person. Is that a surprise to anybody? I mean, is that even noteworthy, right? Like, can you actually have a great job without interacting with people? I don't know. Maybe there are a couple examples out there, but it's certainly none spring to mind. I liked there's a particular description of it that I thought the examples are useful. Yeah. So it's, thinking about, doctors and lawyers and management consultants are all jobs that require some technical skills, but the people side of it is also very necessary, right? Yeah. And is a big part of the work. Whereas purely technical occupations, which they describe as those requiring knowledge of math but fewer social skills, such as actuaries, machinists, electricians, and billing clerks, have fared badly in terms of both pay and job growth over the past decade and a half. And that doesn't sound too surprising to me. I mean, especially when you put it in the context of that example, right? You look at those roles and you can kind of see if the job that you were doing was primarily computational, large portions of it are probably being replaced by a computer.
Sure. Well, go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
Twofold. So I'm not through this article yet, by the way. But two thoughts that come to mind, though. The first one is Dan Gordon. He's a VC that gave a talk at Startup Grind not long ago. He said, you're either a good salesperson or you work for a good salesperson. And I can relate to that at Routeam because oftentimes I do feel like I'm working for my business partner. And then secondly, I think there is this about 50, 60 years ago, I've been kind of paying attention to this history of computing because of this ACM group that I've been affiliated with. They've been around for 70 years. And, back in the 40s and 50s, it was you could write code, but it was no letters. You couldn't write words. And so Grace Hopper opens the world up, and now there's a bunch of more programmers because she created a better user experience for programmers. So there's a lot of this technology flow is starting to infiltrate across all of us, and we're touching it a little bit, and it's kind of empowering us a little bit more. But I think there's still those really technical, that person doesn't know how to socialize, but somehow they found something they can tuck their head into and get done. I don't know what those jobs are right now, but I'm sure they're there.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the other part about this that I think is really interesting is the article describes is that this shift in our perception of, hard skills versus soft skills probably favors women's more substantially than men overall because of the nature of, probably partly in part because of the nature of jobs available to women, in the course of, let's say, the last 100 years versus today. But also that there's a decent body of research that shows the different levels of in empathy, in terms of the difference between the two genders. And so I think it's an interesting, I guess there's research to support that it better benefits, women, that there's this directional shift. We certainly need more gender equality in that direction. I mean, we're sort of lacking in that, aren't we?
I mean, I agree with that point.
Particularly today.
I definitely agree with that point. A little insider baseball with Data Community DC. When I was voted in with this changeover, there was no women on the board. And I think there was double-digit board members. And then there were 2 women voted in on the same day as me. So there was a total of 2 women board members. Yeah. And there's likely to be a third here soon, a colleague of mine. And her and I, we were chit-chatting around and she basically there may be a new program that's going to be far more interesting than most of the data community programs. It's going to be like, we're basically talking about data science and dating.
Yeah.
There's all these apps going on right now. So there might be a data community DC like program around like talks and collaborations around, machine learning, dating, like, these, we'll see, but it would be cool to see or take it that way.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So I think that begs the question then, as Brandon from the chat is asking. So, there's this body of research that's talking about how soft skills are more important. How do you go about finding a people person to fill a position? How do you identify that person without crossing any lines, without being, without trying to how do you balance that against the hard skills that you need to fulfill a role, I guess is probably the right way to phrase that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that in to some degree that it helps to start off with the acknowledgement that, hiring is hard, right? Most people are not going to get it right all the time. Even the best people are not going to get it right all the time. It's kind of like, compared to a batting average, not to a free throw percentage. When you're doing interviews, I think it's particularly useful to focus on past behavior as an indicator of future behavior. This is something we do in customer interviews all the time,
right.
And so doing it in hiring interviews makes the same amount of sense. Humans are notoriously bad at predicting their own future behavior. So if you ask somebody how they would react in a particular situation, usually the answer you get is an answer of their self, not the actual self. And so when you ask somebody about, when you're trying to discover how somebody would act in a certain situation, it's helpful to ask them about the last time they were in that situation, and not about like all the times in the past they've been in a given situation, because again, like in that case, you'll get their idealized self because they're sort of looking at it over the average and picking and choosing examples, right? But like about the last time, right? And then maybe about the time before that. But specific instances, specific and concrete, so you get at the, what did somebody actually do in that situation, not what they thought they would do.
No, I agree. I mean, the challenge of predictive behavior is also something that bleeds into lots of other different problems, right? I mean, not just in the customer interview, but the truth. I mean, this is why, not to open this can of worms, but the gun debate has been such an interesting thing, because people are saying, well, give a good guy a gun and put him in that situation and he'll take care of it. It's like, well, actually, there's a pretty decent body of evidence that shows that good guys with guns don't react that way in those situations, that lots of other fight or flight responses engage. Even professionals with training oftentimes don't have the ability to intercede the way that they say that they would or could in a different situation. So knowing that there is that, that shift makes that challenging. I don't know. I think that there's definitely some complexity there. Andrew, your thoughts?
I have very little experience hiring for people persons. But I can't speak to like, engaging people or I guess I've got a little bit more experience around project-driven work. Yep. So, just the ones that, the longer you know somebody, the easier it is to kind of get a feel for them. I think the interesting challenge is how do you figure that out in a short amount of time, especially if somebody's coming in a cold interview and you don't really know them. That I have zero practice in. I get to know people and I put a little time into them, and I get to see them produce positive vibes. Yeah, producing.
Yeah, well, a lot of that, it's if you have ways to run an experiment with somebody rather than committing to them long term off of the basis of just an interview, it can be really valuable to see how somebody actually works in the actual environment. So if you have a way to structure that, like, a lot of companies like to work with contractors first and then hire them full time if they work out. Some people have, a probationary period, although in a lot of cases that's more a formality than an actual tryout.
Well, then there's the other question of how do you standardize the process for reviewing that? It may be worth looking at. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's a very important one, right? Because if your process is not standardized, if you don't have some way of quantifying your evaluation of subjective qualitative skills, you can end up running into a lot of bias, right? And our implicit association bias starts to creep in, and the kind of the biggest mistake you can make in hiring is I'll know it when I see it, because then you end up just hiring people who look exactly
and nobody
like you.
needs an echo chamber.
Right.
Yeah, I think there was an episode of House about that, actually. Not the point. No, Brandon's other question, which I think is interesting, is talking about sharing our past failures is a strong word, but our past failures in hiring when trying to find a people person. I'm guessing I'm probably the person most likely to have a response to this question. Do either of you guys have a thought that you want to share? Otherwise, I'm happy to share a story if that.
I've got one.
Okay.
In the earlier days of Routeam, like not conventional hiring, a little bit more on the equity side, but there was one individual that turned out to be like a pretty serious bad apple. And I feel pretty proud at like how I handled it, but not necessarily that we could let him in that far. This person like basically was kind of gearing up, was a really fit person, gearing up to be like a personal trainer, was really smart, came from, I think, contracting world, big business here in the area, federal government. And we started working with him. And then, he got a certified personal training thing covered. And then he started doing stuff for us at Kaiser Permanente. And then later on, we found out that he was actually lying about being a certified personal trainer. So we had to like mitigate that. And at that point, he'd already signed an agreement to be a shareholder. So, and it was one of those scenarios where it was just like not a fully truthful answer that always begets yet another question.
Right.
So I just remained patient and kept asking another question over like the course of like a week and a half until finally he just like came clean on it. I do have a lot of stories where I wasn't patient, but I won't share them today.
Yeah, I would say that I've definitely fallen into the chasm that Teague described earlier about hiring somebody that, looking for some, I'll know when I see it. I without getting into a specific example, because I don't think it's fair to any particular individual, I've seen a couple of instances where, you hire somebody on the basis that their skills are good and you think you might like to go get a drink with them, which seems to be the litmus test for many people in terms of, right. Yeah. Teague is sighing, but that's absolutely, how people look at it. It's very common. A people person litmus test is, would I want to go drink with them? I know lots of people that I like to drink with that I would never work with. And so I don't know why we sometimes fall into that problem of, I like you and I'd like to go get a drink with you. F it, you can do this job. Let's make it happen. We're set as explicit. I guess I can still curse. I'm going to try not to. Nonetheless, I think one of the challenges that comes from that as a leader is recognizing that you don't have a structure in place, that what you're looking for is this sense of, I'll know it when I see it, and my sense of it is good enough to manage that. And it's really not, because we do fall into those inherent chasms of looking for things that we already know for ourselves, and why do you need to hire somebody that'll tell you the same thing you're going to tell yourself? Or in Andrew's case, which has absolutely, happened in the past, to me, that is, you find somebody who misrepresents themselves either because they wanted to sound good in the interview, or they were really excited about the role or anything like that. And you end up in a position where you have to say, this isn't what I need. Even if I were willing to overlook, a discrepancy, let's call it, doesn't change the fact that the person I need to fill this role needs to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it's not the most important part. It is an important part. It just so happens that jobs are trending. It's the swing of a pendulum, right? It's going to go back in a certain direction, and then eventually, as it peaks, it'll end up going in a different way. And I don't know, we'll end up, it'll be that we favor people with brown socks and green hair. I don't know, something like that. Do you have brown socks, Teague? Because I know you'll do your hair green if I ask really politely.
I'm not wearing brown socks today.
This is not that kind of podcast. I want to be clear about what you're wearing or not wearing. Okay, this is a family enterprise. This is not a family enterprise.
I think we just talked about the
Right.
explicit tag, right? I think your point about pattern recognition. Pattern recognition relies heavily on
Right.
heuristics, right? And most of us have not spent our entire lives developing heuristics for hiring, and so we're probably not going to be great at it right off the bat. Right? It takes some practice, and so we have to like be conscious about it in the beginning instead of trying to go straight from not having hired before to I'll know it when I see it. Right? I mean, you don't expect VCs to be able, you don't expect anybody off the street to be able to recognize successful companies like VCs, because even some VCs have trouble recognizing successful companies, right? I mean, like our pattern recognition, even when it's trained, is still subject to all kinds of heuristics that we've developed over a long time in the past. I don't know, Andrew, what have you found useful when you're trying to find the right people to work on your stuff, when you're bringing in partners for Nightowls or for Routeam or things like that?
So in the case of, I guess I'll use ACM as an example here. So ACM, there are about 25 organizers in 5 cities for meetup groups. So I got to capitalize a little bit on my meetup skills.
Nice. Yeah.
So in terms of them, some of them already had an affiliation with the organization, but they're all pretty well connected with the mission. Like basically they use the word inventing instead of the word innovation. So it's like, what inventions are coming that's going to affect society in 5 to 10 years from now? And they have an award called the Turing Award. They give out every year, backed by Google.
Awesome.
It's $1 million award for people who like impact society in a very like compelling technological way. The last person that won it was the guy that did Postgres database, which is pretty much used by most people that are on Heroku.
Well, and beyond.
Yeah.
And that's a major impact.
Absolutely.
Long list of them since '66 getting that award. So it's like this sense of purpose that draws them out, and then it's just tying it to like their day to day, so that they get some value out of it. Because I guess like what you want to ask somebody, so that should be less than half of the conversation.
Right.
Trying to learn about what they're after, and if there's a mapping, should be most of the conversation.
Yeah, I like that. So we've got a couple other things to talk about. We have talked about in the past more about interviewing, and I believe that was in episode 9. Our producer Katie will put the link in the chat for you folks if folks want to hear more about how to do interviews and a little bit more about the specific tactics. You can check out our episode 9 from the archives on iTunes and subscribe to the podcast. Oh my God,
we've been on long enough that we can legitimately call it the archives.
Yeah, right. It's weird how it just creeps up on you.
It's almost as though it's podcast dilation.
How about that? Nice story back there. Yeah, I was just going to say that episode was closer to the beginning than it is to now.
God, I hate everything about us. That's not true. That's not true. Yeah.
So folks can check that out for more on interviewing and getting the right people in. Let's transition to another article from the past week or so about managing those people once you get them in. There's a great article called Radical Candor: The Surprising Secret to Being a Good Boss. This is based on a talk by Kim Scott, and we've got the link in the show notes for you and in the chat. This is another 2x2 matrix, which management consultants love 2x2 matrices, right? So I'll take the blame for that one. This article talks a lot about how to give good feedback and starting by getting rid of the term feedback, because it's such a loaded term and it's usually tied to the annual feedback process that everybody has to do and nobody gets anything out of, and instead focuses on guidance, right? On giving people guidance to be successful and to reach their potential, and it basically comes down to these two axes. So one is caring personally, and the other is challenging directly. And the idea is that successful managers do both of these, right? So in order to be successful, you both have to care about the person that you're managing and care about their success, not just what they can do for you. And you also have to challenge them directly and tell them if they're doing something that's not successful and what you need them to do instead, and give that specific feedback. The 2x2 is in the top right, we've got radical candor, which is the sort of the ideal quadrant. That's when you're doing both of those. If you're challenging directly but not caring about the person, we fall down into the quadrant labeled obnoxious aggression. I
think I've been accused of that more than once.
I'm sure we've all either been there or worked with somebody who was there. And as Kim Scott says, if you can't be in the radical candor section, the obnoxious aggression section is the second best, but you shouldn't shoot for second best, right? And in particular, I think this is one of those. If you can figure out how to be direct when dealing with people, you can also figure out how to be kind in dealing with people, and so there's no excuse not to be in that top right quadrant. And particularly when you see what the other options are, right? So and then on the other axis, if you care about people but you are not challenging them directly, you fall into what is labeled the ruinous empathy quadrant, which is when you it's the boss who loves to be liked but doesn't actually tell anybody how to do their jobs better, and so people end up like getting fired with no warning because they didn't know that they were failing, or end up dragging the team down because one person has a performance issue that's not being addressed, and it can be really problematic and really demoralizing for the whole team in the long run, because the boss doesn't want to be direct and tell folks when what they're doing is not useful. And if you are neither caring nor challenging directly, you fall into manipulative insincerity, which the quote from the article is, most of us left that kind of behavior behind in middle school, which, certainly not everybody, but most of us.
Yeah, I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I'm looking at all four of these and none of these feel appealing. Even radical candor feels like it's the kind of thing. I don't know. It feels like the kind of thing that still can be misinterpreted as offensive. What do you think, guys?
Yeah. I think that's part of the, it's not trivial, right, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right. I think if you are managing folks, you need to give them direct feedback so that they can improve and so that they can succeed and do the job well. And you need to care about them. And I think that part of it depends on, how it's communicated. The acronym that she uses is HHIPP, which I guess is HIP. So that, when you're giving your guidance, it should be humble, helpful, immediate, in person, which is in private if it's criticism or public if it's praise, and don't personalize. So not saying to somebody, you're stupid, but you sound stupid when you say so maybe we should work on getting you some public speaking training so that you don't have that. And yes, as Ryan in the chat is saying, there's some hidden step in there where you establish trust with your reports. And I think that's absolutely true, right? You can't just switch your style to this from whatever you have been doing and not communicate about that. If you're going to adopt this, you have to actually, you have to have the trust of the people who are reporting to you, and you have to explain to them why you're going to be doing this and why you're trying to make this shift, and try to make it possible for everybody to make this shift together. You want to, encourage the entire team to do this, not just sort of throw it in there as management style of the week, right? Because the inconsistency can be as frustrating and as demoralizing and as detrimental as sticking to any one of these modes.
That makes sense. I don't know.
I think that, it looks, the arrows definitely conflict. That's good that they're pointing in a different direction.
Yeah.
Because the challenge directly is towards some goals agreed upon, and the care personally, get away from me, let's have a beer, Yeah. So they're definitely, they definitely butt up against each other, in my experiences. And it's hard to like take it. It's hard for one to work without the other in a work setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm still stuck on in sort of this construct is it feels as though that the boss is the person with the most onus, right? That this is an individual who is, I don't know, that they're the person solely responsible for this kind of challenge versus care, right? So I guess for me, part of the challenge with this is if I have to be, if I can't be radically candor, or if I can't have radical candor, then I have to be, an a-hole. Like I have to be that kind of a person. But that doesn't mean that the other person shouldn't, the employee shouldn't be in a situation where they can't, ask of something, right? That they can't ask for that candor. Am I making sense? I feel as though this is sort of presenting a very one-sided part of what the leadership conversation should be.
Tell me more about that. I'm not sure I understand the objection.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon leaders and managers I think it's important that they be good leaders. Part of that is sometimes challenging people. Sometimes part of that is caring about them. Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's you have to not challenge people because your attention is being directed at others. And I still think that the onus is upon somebody else to respond to that, to say, hey, I need your attention now. So I guess the challenge around this is that I feel that the article isn't necessarily, it's putting all of the onus of being a good leader on having that self-reflection when there are, I guess, external ways of getting that feedback as well. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not communicating this right.
It sounds a little bit like you're saying that some of the onus is on the employee to ask for feedback, to ask for guidance.
Right. Let me put it this way. I would say that it's incumbent upon the leader to have, what's the word I'm looking for? The structure and the wherewithal to put into place those kinds of feedback loops, but it's not a one-sided conversation. I do think that there should be some recognition that at times an employee should be empowered, and hopefully in the right situation they are, to ask for the things that they're not getting. Because as a leader, I want to take care of my people and I want to be able to give them that kind of, let's call it radical candor that they should be receiving. But at the same time, maybe not, my falling, let's say, into the ruinous empathy part is because in part, I just need them to go do their thing. And as a leader, I need them to tell me when I'm not giving them that, when they need to be challenged. So I guess that there's an ownership on the feedback side to make sure that the leader's getting the feedback too, that they may not always be a good leader. I don't know. There's something there that I'm not quite.
Yeah, no. So right. I think there's a piece of this. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm more curious about what that looks like when you don't have a good working rapport, and it's almost like production isn't happening, and you want to change. Like, what does that look like? Yeah. Do you intentionally push the relationship out of that zone?
Yeah.
And then encourage them to go. So they, somebody, right. But what does that look like when there's friction and you're not producing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of, so one is Jason, to your point, I think that, a lot of the article is geared towards the managers, right? And there is probably some onus on the employees, and there's things the employees can do too. But when you're the manager, you can't count on, you can't force your employees to take responsibility.
No, of course not. I mean, the onus comes from the leader saying, this is the right feedback loop, right? This is the person that I am hired, and I love them and I respect them and I want their feedback, and let me put the right mechanisms in place for them to get it, is I think my point.
Yeah. So like skip level meetings or manager guidance sessions may be very useful to make it possible for your employees, your direct reports to make it easier for them to speak truth to power, right? Put in place that feedback loop where your reports can tell your manager the things that you need feedback on, and then your manager can give you that without attribution. So there's no fear of retaliation. You can get people to be open and honest about what's working and what's not. And it really is, you're right, more than just one person, one person doing this in a vacuum. It really has to be the entire organization working together to work on it. I think, Kim Scott makes the point in the article that, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Sure.
Which is, you have to start with yourself. And I think that that's good advice in a lot of settings. But in particular, I think when you are in a management setting, when you are managing in an environment, particularly where there's a high degree of uncertainty, it is useful to start with controlling your own behavior and your own reactions, and then work from there to the things that are slightly harder to control. Right? It's easier to change our own behaviors than to try to control someone else's.
Yeah, that I can get with. And to Ryan's point too, I mean, maybe this is just the leader taking the first step. That this isn't intended to be the system, just a starting place for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is people have difficulty with the process of giving feedback. I think, all you have to do is look at the annual review process at any number of corporations to see how broken feedback is in most work environments. And so it would be easy to look at that and say, well, feedback doesn't do anything good anyway, rather than thinking of like, oh, well, maybe we're just all doing feedback wrong because that's all we've ever seen.
Andrew, thoughts, comments, concerns, questions?
I got such a small team. I have nothing to contribute.
Yeah, but you've worked, hold on. That's not fair, because you've worked on teams in the past that are larger. It's not about what you have in the past worked on teams that might have had these difficulties, particularly in the federal government as a contractor. Good Lord.
I mean, I'm definitely interested. I've had I've had a little bit of a disconnect when I was like, I had a performance review and I wanted to know about more projects starting within the company.
Yeah.
And my performance review happened. I mentioned that. And then like 4 months later, I found out about a project way late, and I asked my manager, and they're just like, oh yeah, that happened. I was like, oh, okay. I'm just like, all right. I didn't like push it or anything, but it was like, that would have been a good time to keep me around longer.
Yeah. I think,
so that's like feedback that like, it was there. It was on paper,
It's one of those things. Would have been nice to know in the moment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a big challenge, I think. Engineers made middle management. They created the structure back in the 1920s, I think. They designed it.
Probably.
So it's
But is that? I mean, is that like a movement that we should move past? Nobody designs an Art Deco across the board anymore. So maybe it's time to move on. That kind of thing. Maybe
2020 engineers will come up with a better management structure.
Not if we don't get more people into STEM. There you go. See, full circle.
Coming back around. I see what you did there.
This is why you pay me the big bucks. Are you paying me? I'm not. No. Okay. Anyway.
Paying you in Google AdWords credits.
Great. I'll take it. That's fine. As long as it's not Bitcoin. I still don't believe that that's a real thing. I'm pretty sure that's just a made up thing.
Well, it's virtual. If that's what you mean.
I mean actually imaginary. Just so we're very explicit about this.
It's like imaginary numbers. I have negative. I have
right.
I.
Right. I have one over I coins. There you go.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right.
Somewhere there's a Matthew crying for no good reason. Yeah.
We're such geeks. So moving on to the next piece here. I think we talked a little bit about the starting with yourself, and in particular, that's some advice that I always give when we're talking about ego risk. And one of the other things that we talk about a lot when we're talking about ego risk is mindfulness, and in particular, mindfulness at work. And I think that it's becoming such a movement that there's starting to be some backlash, which is, on some level is encouraging, right? Because backlash means you're actually having an impact. It means that someone's actually paying enough attention to disagree with you. And so there's an article here that's called "Mindfulness at Work is Not Mind Control," and it's a response to some of that backlash from the Institute for Greater Good. What is this? The Greater Good Greater Good Research Group, something or other.
University of We're Feeling How Good We Are About Ourselves and Each Other meditation movement program.
Well,
teasing.
okay. So to be fair, right? Yeah, it's positive psychology group at University of Berkeley. Well respected, not meaning to imply otherwise. But so the article talks a little bit about some of the concerns, right? That mindfulness is. So here's the quote is: "Mindfulness is an ideal tool to induce compliance with its focus on individual management of our responses to forces we're being told are well beyond our control." This is the criticism: is that the idea of using mindfulness to treat as a stress reduction tactic in corporate settings, when lack of mindfulness is not the cause of the stress, but the cause of the stress is something structural in the organization, right? And so the backlash is this idea that if we just teach, we teach mindfulness and then we don't have to worry about positive work environment because people will be, will be docile. And the response to that criticism was along the lines of, I've never seen mindfulness, actually turn people into docile cows. And in fact, it can be the very opposite. And that, in general, I think people seem to agree that compulsory mindfulness at work is not a good idea, but that it can be useful to offer it to folks in an environment that might be one of a number of tools that they can choose to use. But I think the backlash has some points, right? That you don't want to see it as a silver bullet, and it shouldn't take the place of fixing some of those toxic work environments, maybe where you have obnoxious aggression or manipulative insincerity.
I said I was sorry. I won't manipulate you anymore. I don't know. The mindfulness movement as mindfulness as a movement to me is interesting. There's, to hearken to my earlier days as a semi-professional actor, there's a lot of that built into different kind of creative programs, right? The idea that in order to truly embrace, something in the moment, that one has to be mindful of everything, right? Not just as a meditation exercise, but that actually that this sort of sense outside, within and outside of yourself is important to doing the work effectively, to doing it interestingly, to do it the way that it needs to be done. The application to the office environment and more traditional, corporate and business settings, I think makes sense. I also think at the same time, we're overestimating its power in both directions, right? I don't think that it's going to turn us into mindless sheep, and I don't think it's actually that really an effective technique to feeling better at the office. But what it boils down to is just sitting in your office or sitting in a chair and taking a deep breath for 5 minutes. I mean, it's just centering yourself.
Could be.
Well, most of the research, most of the stuff that I've seen, I mean, obviously there are meditation techniques that go with it, but what it boils down to is being a little bit more in touch with you in the moment and sort of, taking a step back. It's almost as much a disconnect as it is sort of a revitalization.
Yeah, and I don't want to, there's a lot of different ways that people can have mindfulness practices, and some of them work for people. So I don't want to say there's one particular thing that is what mindfulness at work looks like. But yeah, I think in general the goal is to be more present in the current moment. To be,
if it makes somebody modestly, incrementally, feel better in a moment or feel better throughout the day, I think it's absolutely useful for that. I think that anytime that we get into this situation where a movement, whether by the people practicing it or by the people who become converts, it turns into this new wave, this is the thing that's going to fix all of your problems kind of concept. I think that's where you lose me, in part because I think that means it's sort of jumped the shark. Not lean startup. Lean startup will always be perfect no matter what.
I think it's interesting both that, mindfulness is seen sort of both as new wave and also older than the concept of corporations.
Yep.
Right. I mean, this is not exactly new stuff, right? This has been around for many thousands of years.
Yep.
But the idea of having, mindfulness and meditation as an offering within a corporate work environment seems to be relatively new, and is I think that, to your point, we're kind of on that Gartner hype curve. We're probably just cresting the peak, right? And we're getting into the point where it's like, okay, that was a thing we did 5 years ago, and
yeah, pretty much.
Which is kind of too bad, because I think, when handled well and implemented well, I think that a mindfulness practice can be immensely valuable,
Sure.
both in corporate setting and for entrepreneurs in particular.
So I've been around a couple of like healthcare professionals and directors and corporate wellness, and some of the conversations that I've heard is, in this area, particularly federal government and big business related, like they use better words, stress management and so forth, but there is a lot of depression. Like there's a lot.
Yeah.
And so like there's, how can we level people up a couple of points? And I think this is like, a constant endeavor for businesses to try to figure that out. I think wellness is one source. Another one is just, going back to the 1920s engineering model for management.
Yeah.
There's any number of ways to like tick the points up a little bit. But like it's definitely like a growing space. I think corporate wellness, it's like some companies are kind of doing it right and everybody feels like it's elective, and they don't feel like their parent is watching them. And I think others maybe not do so good a job at doing that, but I think it definitely helps a couple of points up,
Yeah. Well, and I think that, the intent matters, right? I mean, this is going back again to the previous article about caring personally, right? If you are encouraging mindfulness because you don't want to fix structural problems in your organization, then that kind of amounts to insincere, manipulation. But if you actually are doing it because you care about your employees and you want them to lead happy, healthy lives, I think that as a guiding principle tends to be both more successful in the individual case and more successful for the company as a whole.
Yeah.
George, you're looking super smart here, connecting these articles together in a theme.
Oh, he's good. Yeah.
It's all about the segues.
Yep.
So, and we're, coming close to the end of our time, but one more article I want to throw out there that's totally unrelated to those two, and I won't necessarily try to relate it, although maybe I will, is that NASA has opened up astronaut applications for civilians.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this moment to formally announce that I will not be seeking a position as an astronaut. I know that disappoints a great number of you.
Man, that was a real letdown.
It was. My parents have been threatening to, quote, send me to the moon for years. I did not realize that actually they were threatening violence. I thought for a long time that they just wanted me to aspire to greater things. So
you thought you were going to get to go to space camp.
Right. I would have loved to have gone to space camp and just truly embraced that level of nerdiness.
I'm curious if the first part of the process is like if they vet them out hard and quick, or if it's kind of fun at first and you just go through a round just to like be in a playground for a little while,
I imagine. I imagine they probably, if you want to talk about an organization that is going to hardcore look at every word on every CV, it's going to be NASA on the astronauts thing.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely going to be a strong weed out at the front end, right?
Yeah.
Although apparently, you've got your computer science engineering background, so that's a mark in your favor. So who knows? Andrew might be the next astronaut.
Well, as Ryan is pointing out in the chat, active military may have a step up. Those Air Force guys seem to be pretty consistently, the ones getting those jobs. Might be something.
It helps to be able to fly,
a thing,
spacecraft. a thing at all. Yep.
To have some understanding of the G-force effect on a body. Yes, I am aware.
Yes, to be able to fly something more than a Banshee and Halo. Yeah.
I'll strike the technology part on my resume that says Air Force technology, blah, 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 blah.
There you go. I'll say this. It's definitely not going to be like flying in a jetpack in Fallout 4, which has been my current thing. So it's going to be impossible. I'm never going to be able to do it. It's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how can we mention NASA without a shout out to a friend of the show, Lauren Worley from
she's
from NASA.
She is literally the best. We should have her on. Actually, what we should do is we should see if we can get an astronaut applicant on here to talk through that process. That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be good. And we had Lauren on for episode 10 talking about the business of space, and she hinted to us that this was coming, and now it has the applications have finally been opened, and they will run through mid-February for those of you who are interested in applying.
If anybody in our audience does apply, send us a note. We will absolutely have you on and hear all about the process. Before we close things out, Andrew, I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about, real quick, any projects you're working on coming up that people should check out, or websites that folks should check out to learn more about you or the work that you do.
Sure. So I guess what I'm doing right now is I'm just positioning myself in this data community side thing. And, you can find me on conquer.com with a K, not a Q. That's my own site. And I am definitely interested in talking to anybody in the health and fitness space or in the healthcare space here in DC.
Very cool.
Fantastic.
We will make sure to add that, the Conquer address, to the show notes as well, for those of you interested. Very cool. Well, let me just say thank you again for joining. I mean, it's always a pleasure to have you, and your brain as any part of any conversation. So thanks again for taking some time to join us today.
All right. Thanks, Teague.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. Hold on for one sec. Teague, where can everybody find you on the internet?
You can find me at Teague Hopkins on Twitter or at teaguehopkins.com.
Very cool. And you can find me at Jason Ellis on Twitter. And of course, you're always welcome to email me, jason@brllnt.co. That's brilliant without the vowels.co. We'll be here next week with all sorts of goodies for the holiday season for our next episode 21, which does not have a title yet. Perhaps we'll just, what we'll do? Perhaps we'll do a vote for user or for name.
You don't want to try and name it after the weather again?
You know what?
That went so well last time.
You know what? I don't like your attitude. It hurts my feelings. I think we should end the show on the sound of me crying now. So if you'll excuse me.
We could do that.
Okay.
We could do that. And if people want to hear more of Jason crying, you can subscribe on iTunes to get every episode of this podcast when we launch it. And if you join our email list, we'll send out notifications when we are going to do a live show, so you know when to join us live and ask questions in the chat and join the lovely folks here who are listening live and having fun and having a conversation alongside us.
Absolutely. So be sure to visit StartupJab.com, check us out, send us a note, and subscribe. We've covered all the bases this time.
I think we did.
We're so good at this. Okay. Well, thanks again for joining. We know you have a busy days, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. Teague, I think it's time to play us out.